Advocacy State Director. And we called this press conference today because last week, Mid-American ran a series of ads across the state which misrepresented AARP's position on 561 and ads that continue to hide the truth about what House File 561 actually does. The ironically titled Straight Talk ads, which even more ironically ran during the week leading up to April Fool's Day, kicked off Mid-American's statewide campaign to fool Iowans into favoring HF561. Iowans deserve better than to be fooled. The ads state that AARP is an opponent of nuclear power. That is an outright lie. Even though we at AARP have consistently stated in testimony before the House and Senate Commerce Committee, in AARP mail and email correspondence with lawmakers, AARP members, and Iowans, in AARP paid ads and editorials, and even in our discussions with you here in the media, it apparently bears repeating. AARP is not opposed to nuclear power. In 2010, Mid-American was authorized to receive $15 million of ratepayers' money to allow Mid-American to study nuclear power as an option. AARP did not oppose that legislation that actually paid the company to consider nuclear power as an option. But now, we at AARP today do ask, where is that study? How have those ratepayer dollars been spent? The question of whether to build a new nuclear power plant is in Mid-American hands. It is critical to know that they can build a new plant without House File 561. The question for Iowa lawmakers is whether to shift the nearly $1 billion to multiple billions in costs and risks associated with building new plants from the company to its customers. That is what AARP opposes. That is what House File 561, not according to, as their ads say, opponents, as Mid-American, what opponents say. This is not what opponents say. One of the slides you can see up here is a quote that we lifted right from the Iowa Utility Board. And that statement, this is the Iowa Utility Board staff memo from last December. And the statement you can read right there very clearly about House File 561 shifting all the risk from the company to ratepayers. That's a line lifted directly from the Iowa Utility Board staff memo. And indeed, the Iowa Utility Board staff are the referees in rate making. But just like referees, they are constrained and must abide by the law given to them. The consumer protections they and the consumer advocate are allowed to provide are only as good as the protections afforded to them under the law. That is where House File 561 fails, but according to their IUB staff memo, in multiple ways, House File 561 actually, as you can see here again on the blow-up, actually creates undesirable incentives. For instance, one of the many specific undesirable incentives this IUB staff memo, and we have it up front here, cites is that because ratepayers bear nearly all the risk in House 561, the company has less incentive to minimize risk and to keep loss low throughout the build. In fact, the higher the costs get, the more return or profit they get. I'll conclude by calling attention to one of the most egregious incentives or risk shifts of House File 561. This provision that we have here on the left blow-up is taken right from the bill, and this provision remains in this bill even after all the currently adopted amendments. Page H of House File 561 still allows the utility to recover a turn-on, meaning a profit, and all costs incurred even if the company doesn't complete the plant. This very core problem with the idea of CWIP, or Construction Works in Progress legislation, that the company and its shareholder profit from failure. Again, the company and its shareholders profit from failure. That was something we picked up from the Tampa Bay Times newspaper coverage last week of the billion-dollar problems their Florida ratepayers are being forced to deal with as a result of similar CWIP legislation. That's the core contrast here. AARP is fighting for a better deal for ratepayers or customers who bear all the costs and risks, and Mid-American is fighting for their shareholders, the same shareholders who are paying for ads in favor of a great deal that HF 561 provides them. We hope lawmakers side with consumers, not with big business and company shareholders. And with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Sharon Trinan. She's an AARP volunteer, an AARP Iowa Executive Council member from Ackley, Iowa. Sharon is a shareholder in Berkshire Hathaway, the parent company of Mid-American. Sharon couldn't join us today in person, but she does join us by phone. So here I'm going to put the mic up to the telephone here. Sharon?
Anthony?
Go ahead, Sharon.
I'll keep my remarks short. I do have stock in Berkshire Hathaway, and I also have stock in Alliant Energy, which also supports HF561 and Mid-American Energy's efforts to change Iowa law and its current consumer protections for new power. I have had these investments for years because I happen to think the world of Warren Buffett. I think he's an extremely smart man and certainly no April fool. He knows his investments, and that's why I invested. But it does raise red flags for me that this is an investment his company wants to force upon Iowa utility customers rather than me and my husband as shareholders. I take no comfort in knowing that HF561 guarantees a profit for me as a shareholder in Berkshire Hathaway. But as a utility customer in Iowa, I oppose HF561. I'd rather not pay on the front end as a ratepayer just so I can benefit as a shareholder. My husband and I feel very fortunate that we were able to save and invest in some stock. But I'm even more concerned about the many elderly and other Iowans on fixed incomes. Anthony pointed out that yesterday was April Fool's Day. I want to point out that it's an even more important day for so many Iowans. April 1st is the day Iowa's winter utility shutoff moratorium ends. I just happened to read last week in the Cedar Rapids Gazette that about 224,000, or nearly 250,000, Iowa households are behind on their utility bills and therefore face potential shutoffs as of yesterday. I find that number is simply astounding, especially considering that the mild winter Iowa has had this past season. So the bottom line is this. I really hope our state lawmakers pay attention to these facts and figures and what Anthony has provided too, and vote for Iowans struggling in this economy and all of us Iowa utility customers rather than voting for me as a shareholder. Thank you for the opportunity to make my voice heard.
And thank you, Sharon. I'm going to turn the floor over to Tony Vola. He is our state president, also a volunteer. He's also a shareholder in Berkshire Hathaway, and he's going to close things off with his remarks.
Good morning. My name's Tony Vola. I'm the state president of AARP. As Anthony said, I'm a volunteer. As he also pointed out, my wife and I own shares in Berkshire Hathaway. This morning, I too will try to be a little short and blunt and let everybody know that those that know me know that I'm a common sense sort of person. Those of us that like Will Rogers, and he said about 80 to 90 years ago that common sense ain't so common no more. My particular opinion is HF561 once again proves him correct. You look at the structure of what can be done, and that is it takes all the costs, it takes the upfront costs, and it shifts them to us, the utility users. It reduces the risk on the company and puts it all on the users of the utilities. We don't know the costs. We haven't seen a plant design. We know it has not been approved by a national regulatory body. We certainly know that nothing like this has ever been built or operated anywhere in the world. And therefore, common sense tells me that the escalation of the cost, the risk is high. We go back to the common sense rule. We once again say customers pay all the costs. The company doesn't have the risk, the shareholders don't have the risk, even if it gets canceled. I made a choice to invest in Berkshire Hathaway, but if you look at HF561, as a Mid-American customer, I don't have a choice. I have to pay the cost. You look at other utility customers across Iowa, they too may have to pay the cost, even if they're not Mid-American customers. We know these costs have ballooned. We know that other states have had issues. We know that the risk is, in my opinion, high. Therefore, I join with AARP and thousands of other Iowans in asking Iowa lawmakers to make the right choice, make the common sense choice, and oppose HF 561. Now I'll turn it back to Anthony if anybody has any questions. Thank you.
Any
Are you
questions?
encouraging shareholders to sell their stock? Are you trying to organize investors to make their opinion known to the company?
We're keeping our eyes on the prize. We're trying to defeat this bad legislation. That's what our goal is. We have, actually as of last Friday, right, we sent out some mail to clarify our position, clarify what HF 561 does for customers in their state. But no, I mean, our focus is about getting this bill defeated, and if it has to move forward, putting in some common sense consumer protections that still fail to be in there. So, you know, part of calling out Mid-Americans, they misrepresented, actually lied about our position on it. And it's important for Iowans to know the facts about what this legislation does, about what our AARP position is. And that's what we're trying to do. You know, Sharon gave some good statistics about how many Iowans can't afford a potential increase on their pocketbooks, particularly for something that might not even be built.
Are you planning to sell your stock?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
Are you
that.
planning to sell your stock?
Am I planning to sell my stock? Absolutely not. As Sharon said, Warren Buffett's a pretty good guy. He's done a great job. I don't think there's anybody in here that would say that they didn't wish they would have bought that stock back in 1950. However, in this particular case, I hope that the influence that he has over Mid-American will force him to do, will ask him to do the right thing. And that is, as a business owner, as a company, I too am a business owner, you must accept your portion of the risk. Do not transfer it all to the customers.
Is there a shareholders meeting coming up soon?
I don't know. I think there was actually one a few months ago. I know other friends that have. Yeah,
But nobody raised, no shareholders raised the issue?
Don't know that. I don't know. I mean, I didn't attend it. I don't know. I don't know if it's been raised or not.
I didn't read anything in the report.
Yeah.
But nobody showed up at the meeting to raise?
Oh, no, there were plenty of people at the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting.
Who challenged this
No,
bill?
not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, and look, here the whole thing is, like we said in our remarks, we don't begrudge them trying to make money. We just adamantly disagree with it. Their ability to doing it upfront on consumers and forcing all the risk upon ratepayers and consumers. That's what we disagree with. I mean, that's why it's important for Iowans to know what this legislation does and doesn't do, and that's what it does. You can see why you'd want to do it if you're a shareholder. You think it's just unfair to ratepayers.
Do you have any sense if this is going to be called up for debate? I mean, it's been a couple weeks since it's been modified and it hasn't been called up for debate. Does that give you any comfort?
I think Senator Grounds was quoted as recently last week has a 50-50 chance. I'm just repeating what I read. I think it is. So when you're talking about a 50-50 chance, what we're saying very clearly is this needs to be changed if you have to pass it. You have to put some of the risk back and cost back on to shareholders and the company.
You think what's happening has confused Iowans when they read what your organization says, when they read what Mid-American says?
Yeah. Well, we've been nothing but factual. Like I said, that's why, if you look at our blow-ups, here's our sources. This blow-up is a blow-up of the Iowa Utility Board staff memo. Everyone cites Iowa Utility Boards as a neutral source. Like I said, they're the referee. They're constrained to play by the legislation, the law given to them. But that's our source here. This source is the actual law. I mean, what we read from is, again, the utility board staff and what the law says. We don't make any assertions that aren't true, unlike the ads that Mid-American has been running. And in terms of that's part of the purpose of having a press conference, to try to get out in front of it, make sure we're clarifying not just today, but with members and other communications, mail and email, clarifying what our position is, and just as important, clarifying what this bill does.
Any other questions? Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you for your time. Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome. Have a wonderful day.
Did you go? Yes, they are in here. And Tony, you're from Sailor Township, right?
Yes.
Sailor Township.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Mr. Vola, what's the kind of business now?
The business I owned, in-home care company. Called GH2.
Sure do.
About 65.